Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. 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 Have you ever felt? Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. As a technology company, it seems whenever you get all your stuff together, there's always some little hiccup in getting stuff started. just the nature of the business, I guess. Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of The Critics. I've got three fantastic guests today to come and talk to us about, can I expect more from my employees? I believe this is a question, at least myself as a leader, I've had many dark nights of the soul, kind of going to sleep at night saying, gosh, can I push the accelerator a little bit more in terms of the productivity of my people, and at what cost? Or do I need to pull back on that throttle a little bit more because I need to spend a little more time with my people? And just being able to see where you are at any point in time is actually something that has kept me up many, many times. And I've just kind of questioned myself. And the point of today's discussion, hopefully, is to give you a little more insight as to how you can see and what tools are available in looking at that. And a lot of that is just based on data that you already have in an organization. So I want to kind of start out first by going around the horn and introducing some of the folks that are part of our conversation today. Chase, president, I want to make sure I'm saying this properly, Chase, Goodale Holdings, right? And you're owner of Pest Control Consultants. Chase, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and you did pronounce that correctly.
So, Chase, tell me a little bit about this. I mean, I kind of started out with that little dark nights of the soul issue. Do you ever feel like you've been there before, where you're worried if you're throttling too much or need to put step on the brake a little bit? Has that ever occurred to you?
You know, it definitely has, and a couple of my business partners tell me I don't have brakes. So, you know, I can push into people for sure, and I think it's something that we should all be sensitive of in towards, how much push should we push into our people, or motivate or encourage, and also kind of be sensitive on when to maybe take a step back, and go a different route.
Well, good. I'm glad to have you on the conversation today. I'd love to see some of your perspectives and insights. Artel, Director of Operations for Point Pest Control. When you and I first talked, we talked about this sort of human side of people, right? When you bring them to business, there is a human that comes to work for you. We're in an interesting environment post-COVID. I think if you can say it's done, I don't know if it really is. Talk to me about this idea of throttle versus brake. What's your perspective on it? Has that changed as of the last couple of years?
It has changed from the standpoint of understanding when to put on the throttle and when to put on the brakes. And if we're really looking at it from the stand as holistically as we can, we also realize that the brake and throttle is going to be different for each person. And so providing that opportunity to get with people on a one-to-one basis to know when you're going to push the throttle or when you need to put on the brake is very, very important. So making sure that you have that understanding before you even approach your folks is, I believe, to be very, very important.
So this is really interesting. I'm a little bit of a car nut, and I've got a BMW M3 sitting in the garage, and I've also got a minivan. And as soon as you said that, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, yeah, there's definitely a little bit of performance difference between the brakes and the brakes and the accelerator in those two vehicles,
Exactly.
especially with all the kids' equipment in the back of the minivan. That thing does not turn on a dime or stop on a dime either. Last but not least, Alex Solinsky is as a fractional chief operating officer and a consultant to companies that are starting up, getting their organizations running as part of Blazes. Alex, what did I miss? Is there a piece of that equation in terms of throttle versus brake, that analogy that makes sense to you? What did you say?
I just looked up what a throttle is because I wasn't totally sure. So there's that. A big part of what I do is take startups to scale ups. And so it's when companies have gotten their sales going and now they have to deliver so much. And what they're wanting to do is put on the throttle to get their teams as bigger, faster, bigger delivery teams, but they're doing it without and sometimes without the systems and the routines and the procedures and understanding even their future org structures in this really reactive way. And so I'm really looking at, are we moving quickly out of reaction, or are we moving quickly because we paused long enough to make a strategy and then move quickly?
Yeah. So this conversation, for those who are joining in, I think we had over 120 some odd people who registered for this session. So here's what I'd like, just because I think you can help us guide and nurture the conversation and where it goes. I'd love to hear where you're connecting from, because we've got people who've registered from all over the world. I'd love to hear where you're connecting. So please, in the comments, if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, you should see on the right-hand side, there should be a comment box. Type in where you're connecting from. I'd love to see where it is you are.
And let me know if you're in London, because I'm actually in a long layover and it's calling from a long stopover in London right now, and I'd be happy to hear some tips.
Yeah. So we've got representation from London as well today. Chase, I want to kind of come back to you and ask you a question. Ertel talked about this idea that different people have got different throttles and brakes. And you said, you're on the gas a fair bit. Talk to me more about that, because I got to imagine there's some temperance of that, right? There's times to push really hard. There's times to push a little bit. And it's never usually just 100% gas. Sometimes it's, maybe 50% gas. Am I saying that right? Does that kind of reflect the way you think about things?
Yeah, I mean, as the leader of my company, I feel like it's my job to be the driver. So, everything starts with me as far as setting the tone. And then I need to put people around me that can maybe tell me when I've got too much gas, or I'm getting after it too much, or wanting to go. My dad, who was my previous business partner, used to say to me, don't put the hog in front of the pig. And I never really understood what he meant by that, because I was all gas and no brakes. And, I think it's good to have people around you that are willing to say, hey, is this the best decision? Or should we take I like what Alex said about systems and processes. You got to have those things in place. You can't just go 110 mile an hour and have no way to grow your people, grow your systems, those kind of things. So I think for me, as the leader of my company, I naturally am a driving personality. So I naturally want to go big and go fast. But, I think as I've learned and matured over the years, there's a time and place to slow things down and get things right and get systems put into place so you can scale and grow, effectively.
So I'll maybe relay a little bit of a personal story here based on what I'm kind of hearing from you. Is the reason I have that BMW in the garage is because I love racing cars. As a 7-year-old, when I was sitting in front of video games, the way I used to drive pole position or any one of those games is foot on the gas 100% and just try to steer my way through every single turn in the road. I don't know if you all have ever played games like that. It doesn't work, right? There's sometimes you got to lift a little bit, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to take your foot off the gas. Maybe just not 100% gas all the time. I think that's a little bit of what I'm hearing from you, Chase. Is that right?
Yep.
Ertel, with thoughts or reflections on that? Because this whole development of personnel along the way is super important to you, right?
It's absolutely. I think one of the things I like that Chase said was he has people around him. If he happens to be the thoroughbred, he's going to need somebody that's going to, you know, massage the thoroughbred and let him know when he needs to, you know, feather the throttle. Like you were saying, as far as, you know, in pole position, the video game, if you smash on the gas, you're not going to be able to take that corner like you're supposed to. So you got to feather that, you know, bring that back in. And knowing when to do that is important, but also having people around us that can help us negotiate those type of things and make us aware of those type of things are also as important. So, you know, I tip my hat to Chase to saying, listen, I know I like to run and I may have my blinders on, but I'm also going to have people around me that are going to, you know, pull me back when I need to and let me know when I need to slow down. In addition to that, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. In addition to that, again, I'm really much more focused on systems that making sure that systems work efficiently. But in order for them to work efficiently, we got to make sure that the people are doing what they need to do. And we never, you know, at point, one of the things I say to my management staff is that we never crowd all of our people in as one lump. We have to take the time, regardless of how many people, get to know them each. Because again, using the throttle in the gas scenario, not everybody needs a lot of gas. You know, your BMW is fast, but you may need a Mack truck, you know what I mean, to pull things around. Sometimes you need Clydesdales, going back to the horse, you know, or you need, you know, a thoroughbred. So you just need to know which folks are. And in some situations, you might even need, you know, My Pretty Pony. It depends upon what's going on, you know, but you have to make sure you're taking that time to get to know people in order to know how's, you know, necessary management in that regard.
Well, Ortel, I want to give you a little kudos and shout out here. I never thought that My Little Pony would have made it into one of these conversations. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation here.
That's my gift to you. Okay.
I want to reach. There's a couple people who have been connecting in. Brenna Chapman from Dixon, Illinois. Mary from New York. Janine from the Philippines. Nick, hey, good to see you. It's been a long time. And Mary says, yes, Artel, hire people you trust and then trust them to let you know when to ease off the throttle. Yeah, I think that's exactly what you're saying there, Artel. Alex, you worked with lots of different organizations, starting from the ground up to scalability. Tell me about this. Is this letting off the throttle thing? Have you ever seen that leaders have had a challenge with that before?
I think what I see leaders, I don't have a car metaphor. I gave my car to my mom last summer. So I'm out of it, guys. I'm sorry. So the challenge I see the most is leaders in the beginning, because I'm often we're transitioning from founder CEOs to scaled up CEOs. And these folks are a lot like any good leader. They're very driven. They're trying to get their hands in everything. They're always taking action. And what we're trying to do is transition them out of the day-to-day operations of the organization and into the visionary leaders that they're supposed to be. A lot of that way to tactically do that for us is to define roles. And so we're going to be really clear as to what the roles are now. So look, you're not the CEO, the salesperson, the account manager, the project manager, the part-time developer. You're not all those things anymore. You are the representative of this company to the outside world and representative of the outside world to this company. And that's it. You set the vision and you communicate in and out of this bubble that we've created. And that's it. And now we have other people to hold those roles. So in that way, I don't know that we're slowing down, but we're narrowing in the focus. And if anything, in that way, we're speeding up everybody in their individual roles.
Yeah, I think the word I'm hearing is amplify, right? We're trying to amplify each other to do what we do well. And I think, Chase, that kind of touches to your point is it's gas. It's not necessarily letting off of it so much as trying to find out what each person contributes to building that motion, that forward motion moving forward, right? And we also had Josh joining, Josh Weber joining. Hey, Josh, welcome to the conversation. For all those people who are joining in, I'd love to hear, just like Mary chimed in and said she got a key point from Ertel. I'd love to hear if there's some key nuggets that you've already got. I'd love to hear what it is that you already taken away from this. Chase, it looked like you unmuted yourself. Were you about to say something there?
Nope. I'm certainly ready to, though.
Well, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to bring some slides up on screen, and I'd love to kind of pull apart sort of a situation that's happening in a company, because this is all about how much more can you get out of your people, how much more productivity is there in your people. But we've got to balance it with, I think, the sort of what the common thread here is. It's not about just mashing the floor to the throttle, because then you do what Vinay did as a 7-year-old and you just drive off the track all the time. It's trying to find feathering the throttle. For Trell, to use your term, Alex, I got to come up with another analogy that's non-automotive related now. Give me a second here. Let me bring up my screen and let me share this, and let's kind of walk through this a little bit. And now
This is your screen of analogies.
that's right, my screen of it. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing all analogies today.
Can we have an opportunity for Alex to talk a little bit more at some point about the transition of getting those founder owners to become, I think, because he talked about delegation, which is obviously something that's really important. It's one of the hardest things I've seen, founders do. So if at some point, if we have time, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, so why don't we do that? Let's talk about that. Because I think that delegation piece is a key to some of what we'll see here in terms of how we dissect what happens. So, Alex, why don't you take that as a cue? And Chase, I'd love to hear from you as well on that topic.
Yeah, sure. Well, delegation is this word that when I was little, my parents came and they told me to clean my room, and I would do things that seemed like what cleaning my room would be. I would move, all the stuffed animals from one side of the room to the other. I'd get a rag and kind of move it around the table, and then I'd say I clean my room. My parents would come back and say, "What do you mean you didn't clean your room? The room is not clean." And I feel like delegation is an adult version of that. People tell you to delegate, and then you try some things. Here, team, take this work, and then it fails, it flops. They don't have to work it. I delegated, right? Why isn't it off of my plate and onto theirs now? And so I replaced that with a term that it actually comes from education. It comes from some researchers in education. It's gradual release of responsibility. And so gradual release of responsibility is teaching the founders to gradually let go of a big heavy thing. If you had a big heavy thing in your hands and you're going to give it to, say, your child or anybody else, you wouldn't just drop it. You would hold it, get their hands underneath of it, start to give them some of the weight, but not all of it. Make sure they got it. Slowly take your hands away. Check it out. Did we really have all the weight? Can they walk away? And in that way, it's not as fast as shooting off an email to your team and saying, please do this. It can take a couple of months to release responsibility sometimes. But in this way, the organization is now an organization that you trust because you let go of it. A lot of times when the founders want to keep rolling and they want to do all the work, right? The reason they're doing all the things is because they haven't received trust from the organization. People will say you're a micromanager, you're trying to hold on to all the control, but it's just that the founders haven't learned how to release the responsibility, and the organization hasn't learned how to pick up the responsibility in the way that the founders can trust. So that's a practice, and that can be learned, and we can teach it. I don't know if that's helpful or tell.
I think that's a wonderful phrase that you have, gradual release of responsibilities, because what's interesting to me from what you said that was that people that, to use the adult term, as you said, of delegation without coaching is quite frankly foolish. If what their understanding of delegation is sending an email and saying do this work, that is very problematic. And so I wrote that down. I'll be using that with my team, because the gradual release of responsibilities instead of delegation, I will have to reprogram my mind for that. But I appreciate you speaking into that.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
I'll throw one other comment to that, or perspective on that. See how this dovetails with it. I mean, if there's not a common understanding of what the outcome we're looking for is, when I tell my kids, hey, I want them to clean their room, it kind of doesn't matter to me whether the toys are picked up first, or the books on the floor, or the clothes on the floor is picked up first. It's the fact that they're all put away in the right place. That's really, in my mind, the outcome that has got to be served. When they just go pick up all the toys and say, hey, look, the floor is clean now. Well, that's a different outcome than I'd actually wanted. And I think there's maybe a flavoring of that, is having that shared vision of what the outcome or the measurement for success is. And that's where we talk about accountability, right? There's this delegation, there's accountability, and it's how the two of them dovetail. Does that resonate with you, Alex?
Yeah, Vinay, I think that's amazing. It's probably an excellent segue to what we're going to look at in a moment. And knowing together what the results are supposed to look like is a stellar way of delegation. It's also a stellar way of measuring performance. When we have a really clear, clear and consistent show of expectations, this is what good performance will look like. This is the result of good performance. What we think it looks like. Here it is, and now you can check in on that and have that conversation.
Yeah, Chase, any thoughts on the topic?
Well, I was told once, if you can find somebody to do something 60% as good as you can, you should have them do that. I agree with what Alex has said. It is a difficult thing to let go of the control, especially in small business. And as you get into, scaling your small business, it's a challenge. But for anybody out there listening that's a small business owner, if you haven't read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which is super popular amongst entrepreneurs, you have to be able to let go so you can start working on your business and not so actively involved in it so much. And you want to be able to look at your business from 30,000 feet up, where if you're in it every day and you're doing the work and you're micromanaging everything, it's difficult to do that. It's difficult to cast vision for the direction of the company, as hard as it is. But I struggle with it. We're a small business, and I struggle with putting my hand on all things. And it's a challenge for myself to let go and create systems. And I love too, Ertel, I think you mentioned accountability. It's one thing to delegate, and Vinay, I think you said that. It's another thing to, we're going to allow these, coworkers or employees to take over a certain space in the company. And now what do we have in place to make sure they're doing what we need them to do, and, creating accountability around that. So it is a challenging thing. Very well said though, Alex.
So we got a couple comments here. Mary talks about how that gradual release is really important because people expect it. It's just you turn a light switch and then a delegation happens. And I think delegation is more of a journey than really a destination, right? Josh says, love the analogy of passing a heavy object, slowly letting the employee take the weight and not just dropping it all on them. Trying to get my 6-year-old to clean their room the way I think of it, it's just not computing for them. They're just not there yet. And Lori says, you hit it on the spot when you trust who you're delegating to. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to transition to those slides. And partly the reason why is I think, Alex, to your point is, I think this actually gives us a great set of places to hold people accountable to, so we can start to see, is that delegation actually occurring? So let me share my screen here, and let's do that. And you should see as I transition over here. Do you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to start with this one. So let me just explain what we've done here. And this is some statistics that were used from some metrics, some key performance indicators, KPIs from a pest control company. And what we did is, so the whole topic was, is there more that our people can do? I mean, I've always wondered can I go faster around that turn without going off? I mean, that's kind of the trick. So what we did is we actually charted out all these capabilities that were KPIs or metrics that an organization takes a look at as being positive to financial growth of the company. So the number of stops made, if they're making 3 stops a day, they're only serving 3 customers. Well, not as good potentially as 10, but we definitely don't want to be doing 20. That's way too much, right? So how do we throttle that? How do we feather that throttle to get the right amount? The production per hour, it looks like that's been cut off a little bit here. The production per mile, so the revenue per hour, revenue per mile, the productive time in their actual work time. What we've done here is, if you'll say that 100%, the highest, most effective performers are here at the edge, this green area shows you what the average person was doing. So this white area is what is kind of being left on the table. So to answer that question, is there more that's possible? The answer here is a resounding yes. I want to kind of open up to the panel. What are you all seeing here when you see something like this? What goes through your minds? Chase or Tel?
For me, I look at, when you're in an environment where, production or completing tasks in a timely manner, or doing your job well isn't recognized and people don't feel appreciated in your company, I think you're going to find that people are just going to sit in that green blob average in all areas. If you try to incentivize your people and reward them and encourage them and create that culture of excellence, and you reward that excellence, I think you see people caring a bit more about what they're doing. I think the reality of this chart shows that a lot of people don't care nearly as much as we do as business owners, and so it's our job to get them to care and to create a culture where they do buy in, and if the buy-in's there, I think you'll see that green start to expand on those charts.
So I want to go to the next slide because, I mean, I know for myself, whenever I saw things, I'm always thinking in terms of return on investment. Is the juice worth the squeeze? So I want to kind of show you for this organization, we know that there are people who are performing at this outer rim here. It is possible within the organization. Now, what if everybody, based on the data in that organization, what if everyone were able to step up to that next level? What opportunity were we leaving on the table? And we found out that this out of 100 was a 58 on average. Right, 58 out of 100. If everyone else stepped up to just an 80 in their performance, like getting a B on the test, the 80 being the B on the test, it ended up being almost 10 grand a month per employee, which is a significant chunk. Artel, Alex, since I asked Chase last time, or Chase chimed in last time, Alex, Artel, you see a number like this, what goes through your head when you say that there's this much opportunity that's being left on a table today? It's possible somebody else is doing it. How do we get everyone there? What does that make you think?
I think when I take a look at this, the first question that comes to mind is why. Why is it? What's going on? And see, when we're talking about production work, every route, and Chase will probably agree with this. Every route's not the same density. Sometimes you have one route that there's certain things that just can't be done based on just the logistics. So when I take a look at what's going on from a work time, actual stops made, production per hour, whatever, the first question I ask is, why is this happening? Is this something that is something that's really happening from the technician standpoint? Is it something that he or she really has control of? Or is there something else that we need to do to help that make it better? So as I'm looking at this, when I look at the production per mile, one of the things I'm thinking of, let me take a look at that territory and see what that territory is actually yielding. All right. So production per mile and production per hour, those are two things that I think of, like, why is that happening? Now, if I'm dealing with, and if I find out we have a technician that is slow for whatever reason, then we know that we need to maybe talk to him about being quicker, giving him some more coaching or whatever else. If I have a territory that just is not yielding the numbers because there's just not the what's the word I use? Because it's just not condensed enough, then I know that maybe we have to do something more in sales. So when I took a look at this was more of a, like, asking more questions to really, really screw down into what the actual issue is.
So I'd like to ask anybody who's chimed in, when you're seeing this, what kind of comes to mind? Because I'd like to go to Alex next and kind of get some of your thoughts, Alex, when you see this. But for anybody who's been listening in, who's chimed in, what kind of narrative goes through your mind as you see this? Is this something like, oh my gosh, we're trying to drive profits again, we're putting dollars over people, or we're seeing an opportunity here? How do you see this? Alex, thoughts, reflections on this?
I think Ertel did a really nice job of talking about what to do with these numbers. I think for me, I take a meta step back. I'm always an admirer of this work that you do of bringing out the really key things. When I work with founders, I want them to have a data report card, and the one I do with founders is not nearly as nice as this one. And this has 5 good numbers. We only use 3 to 6 metrics. I think a lot of times people are either overwhelmed with data. They're so into data. They're looking at so much data that they're not really coming to useful conclusions because they're spending more time in analysis than they are in decision making, or they're afraid of data, and so they're not using any of it at all. There are very few people who are in this middle ground, and founders can really benefit from this. What are the 3 to 6 major metrics that you're going to use? And then your, so to speak, lieutenants or directors, which one of these are they going to be responsible for? So who's going to go find out where that $10,000, $11,000 of impact, who's going to go find out which one of these metrics is driving that? Who's going to go find out how to what small changes are going to have big impact in this.
I'll agree with Ortel also and concur with what you say about or what Ortel said, Alex. I think data is more about asking better questions than it is about giving answers, right? Oftentimes people look at statistics and they say, "Oh, I know what's happening next." I think it's an opportunity to understand the behavior better of what's actually happening. I'd like to transition to one more side because opportunity is all the things that we're doing well. But look, there are, and I think Ortel, you talked about this idea of coachable moments or the things where we can spend some time with them, not necessarily an accusatory, "Hey, you're screwing up." I mean, me going to my 6-year-old and telling them they're not picking up the toys off the floor and saying, "Hey, what's wrong with you, son? I thought I taught you better than this." At 6 years old, they may not be ready for that yet. Someone needs to expose that to them. So I want to talk about the other side of things because sometimes there are behaviors that lead to what I'll call risk, right? So these are the areas that I think of as risk or financial leakage. In this scenario, we're talking about average distance between stops. If I have got an employee or technician who's going out servicing customers and driving 50 miles between stops as opposed to half a mile between stops, well, clearly they're going to spend a lot more time doing work if it's half a mile as opposed to 50 miles. Part of what you were talking about, the difference in types of routes or the different geographies. Idle time, are they sitting there on the side of the road and in that vehicle, for example? And these metrics can change per company, but we see safe acceleration, safe braking, and windshield time. If they're spending all their time driving, they're not doing much time. They're not spending much time being productive. Maybe Alex, I'll start with you a little bit here. What do you see here? And then I'll go to Ortel and Chase and kind of the punchline numbers there in how much risk this company's inheriting.
I mean, this organization seems to have a special, what do we say, risk? There's a little more to it than financial risk that other companies would have, right? Because these are actually representative of drivers on the road. So we're talking about, we're talking about profitability, but we're also talking about people's lives to some degree, aren't we? So, I mean, when we talk about impact in this example, it has another level, another meaning to it. But I don't know that I have big thoughts about this other than to say I'd want to investigate which one of these are going to be the most important to keep people safe, keep people on time, and keep us out of lawsuits.
Chase or Ortel, I'd like to go to the next slide and kind of just put the financial impact and see kind of how this processes through your mind as you see it, if that's all right.
You know what? If I may, I apologize because I think there's something that's interesting with this current slide. I'm sorry, Chase, I didn't jump in on you, did I?
Nope, go ahead.
Cool. I'm looking at things that, when you think about like who can control what? Idle time, safe acceleration, and safe braking. That's the person that's actually driving the truck. Windshield time and average distance between stops. That's something that has to be controlled from the office. And so when I take a look at this, if let's just say, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. If 3 of these metrics were in the green or where we would like them to be, then what we need to do is then screw down on those that aren't. If it's a windshield time or average distance between stops, I then have to go and take a look at that territory and see what's going on, and then also talk to the office staff as the person that may be scheduling them. Because again, unless that technician is just running the route in a bad way, those are 2 things that may not be in their control.
Chase, before you chime in, I'd love your thoughts here. I think the word that I'm hearing from you, Ortel, is this idea of friction. As management, as leadership, we're putting some friction in place of our people. And the thing that I say to my kids is, I can point a finger at you, but I'm pointing 3 fingers back at myself. And being able to find out as leadership what friction we're putting in their way that is making if we're assigning them jobs where they've got to drive 50 miles between visits, well, it doesn't matter how good they are. There's some certain limitations that they just can't overcome by themselves, is kind of what I heard. Chase, any thoughts on that topic yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think route density comes to mind looking at this immediately when the windshield time is that much, far away from, other accounts or 50 miles from account to an account.
Yep.
Having better route density would solve a lot of the problems here, and Ortel touched on that. The other thing is why are there so much, why is there so much idle time here? Is there timed appointments that you got to get to, and then you got to drive back to your route that was more optimized because you're accommodating time frames? And can you look at if you're a residential pest control company, can you look at whether does the interior need to be serviced, and if it doesn't, that eliminates those time frames. So you can just do the exterior and move on and be more efficient throughout the day. But looking at this chart as a owner manager myself, I would say, we need to look at getting more accounts in a certain area so we can not have so much drive time. That would be the big thing.
Yeah, and what this netted out to for this particular organization that we did this study for is about $4,300 a month. So if you remember, the first one, the opportunity was about $10,700 a month per employee. This one is another $4,300 on top of that. So I mean, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of about $15,000 a month that's sitting there for that organization that is just unrealized. It's based on friction. It's inability to provide. Artel, I think you talked about this idea of individualized coaching for each one of those people, and being able to see that level of detail and granularity, whether it's a team, whether it's a individual region, a branch, whatever the structure of the organization is, being able to have that level of visibility gives you sort of the fine-grained control so you can figure out how fast you can go around that turn. Bringing it back to that analogy. So what I want to do next is I want to shift into a couple of deep dives maybe into individuals, because we've kind of seen as an organization where there's big picture opportunities that are there that exist for the organization, but then there's also these big picture risks that we can start to mitigate. Let's talk about them at an individual level. And I'd like to welcome anybody from the audience. I haven't looked at the comments here recently, but I'd love to hear what you're seeing from this opportunity and risk level. Are you seeing the same things that Alex, Artel, and Chase are seeing? So I want to show you one more thing here. This is called process strength. And on the left-hand side here, you see appointments daily, average appointments daily. You can see this black line here is what actually happened in that organization. And the blue and the red is how much variability in that process. So if we were having 11 appointments a day, right, they were going as high as 14, 15 appointments a day, right? On the low side, they were doing 4 or 5 less. So 11 is between 7 and 14 appointments a day. There's a lot of variability in what was happening. You can see over the course of that year, there's a lot less friction, and people were doing the same number of appointments all the time. They optimized their routes. There was less friction for their employees to do appointments. I want to stop there and talk for a second. I'll start with you, Artel. Predictability of process. What does that mean to you as a leader? Does that make your life better?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're able to predict the process, that actually saves a lot of time, and it also makes money for you. If you're able to, as I'm looking at this, if I'm understanding this, but not, they've actually settled out to about 12, 13, 11 to 12 stops per day. Is that what my understanding is?
Yeah, that's right. And it's a pretty tight process every day. They pretty much achieve that.
Got you. Right. And that's something you're looking to have happen. So in the process, and it does take a moment before we're actually able to see where it actually levels out. And so, this is something that would be important. This is something that we've actually done as recently within the past 24 months, because we need to take a look at where our technicians should be from the number of stops they should be doing on a daily basis to optimize not only the earning potential for the company, but also for the technician themselves.
And Chase, I'll throw it to you next. I mean, if we contrast that with the graph here on the right-hand side, just looking at data from the company, we can see on the right-hand side, that process has not really changed over time, right? That's the average bill per day. We're telling people, hey, we want you to make more money for the company, right? We want you to bring more dollars and kind of, roll up your sleeves and work harder. But you can see this might be a pricing issue here, right? The company is getting people to go out there and do work, but no matter how many appointments they go to, there's still that variance in how much they're bringing in every single day. Chase, what goes through your mind as you see something like this, and what are you thinking?
Well, a couple things come to mind. Number one, if a route starts a day for a technician at 14 stops, emails and texts go out to alert the clients the service is due. The office needs to be very well trained to hold these customers on the route and really set expectations of how the service is going to go, so the technician can go do 14 out of those 14 accounts. In some cases, the technician gets his route. It was at 14. After reminders go out, it's down to 9. Well, why is it down to 9? Why are some of these appointments jumping off the route? And I think part of that is training, customers that are on a preventative or a regular subscription to allow us to do exterior services. But the other part is when a technician shows up to service the account, they need to know what to say to the homeowner to also resell the service, add as much value as you can, and keep that customer on the route so they can get the service and get the production. And a lot of times, customers will try to say, hey, we don't need it today, or can you come back next week? And I think we got to be prepared to teach our technicians how to, rebuttal what customers might say if they show up, and the customer doesn't want the service. But other than those, couple of things, in my mind, if a technician isn't completing the accounts and it's not the customers that aren't wanting the service, then you have to look at your route scores, your route efficiencies. What time is that technician starting? What time are they finishing? Kind of like Artel said, making sure that they're doing everything that they can do to control this, what's happening to them. But, you're absolutely right. I mean, you want those routes to be as consistent every day as possible. And there's definitely things you can do to make that happen.
So, title of this episode was, how much more, is there more productivity that my employees can have, right? Alex, I want to throw that to you in a second here. And I think one of the things that I've heard from Artel and from you, Chase, is just this idea that, look, now by being able to see some of this stuff, we can start to see where, as management, we're holding them back. We're not equipping them with the tools, the dialogue, the conversations with people. So it's not just 100% their fault, right? It's and I don't think this is about fault either, right? It's about, we're not equipping them with the tools to enable them or empower them to do the next thing. And being able to have visibility into that gives us a lot of capability to be more effective. Alex, is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I would just say, I think what I heard the original question was around, does process help you as a founder? And I think, there are founders who are doing this or business owners who are doing this as a lifestyle business. And so they're happy to stay in the thing as much as possible. They work. It's no different than being an employee. You work your 9 to 5, but you work for yourself, and that's cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you are a founder who has a different dream, and the dream is of continuing to be a visionary, or having more free time, or spending time with your family, 4-hour workdays, anything like that, then you're going to really want to rely on process. You're going to want your organization to run itself. So we have a way to measure how strong our process is and how it's working on average, be able to check in on that at a cadence, then we're going to move ourselves to a stronger position of being the leader of a growing organization, the position of being a visionary, the position of being someone who works on the business, not in the business. So being able to see inside the processes allows you to stay out of the processes.
Yeah. So I want to dig into one last set of slides, because I'm just based on my timing here. I want to look at individuals and kind of how bring it back to those individuals, right? In terms of what we can do. I think we've kind of gone through this journey a little bit of what is happening, what is the opportunity, and the risk that sits on the table, where some of these things are getting their mixed messages in the process, or lack of clarity for the people. Let's start talking about some of the individuals here and what's happening. So, we've got a person here named Tom, and this graph is showing up a little fuzzy for me here. I don't know if that's doing the same for you, but in this case, Tom. So let's take a look at the same graph here, right? Doing highly effective, really good is on the outside edge. This green line here shows you someone who's gotten a B or better on the test. So you want this blue area to be as big as possible. This gray area, the gray line here, tells you what the average person is, and this red area tells you what I'll call low performer is doing. You can kind of see that Tom is between just a little below average on this stops made, about average on the number of hours worked. Production per hour is at a low performer level. Production per mile is at a low performer, at just below average. and safe acceleration, safe braking are well below low performers. I don't know, Chase, maybe I'll start with you. When you see something like this, talk to me in terms of coachable moments and being able to, is there more left here? Is there a superhero that's underneath underneath in Tom? Can we draw that out? And does this give you some clarity into that?
Yeah. So when I see a chart like this, I'm going to look at it as, is what can I do, as a business owner to make Tom's job better? What tools can I equip Tom with so he can do things more efficiently? And so I want to make sure I'm doing all those things first, and then keeping him accountable to the job he's given. And in this chart, there's probably some things that are going on that are out of Tom's control, such as, how actual or his production, per mile, how far away is his stops, those kind of things that we don't see. But my job is always to try to get my employees to maximize their potential and to get them to have what they need to be extremely successful. If I'm not doing that, then I can't expect Tom to be extremely successful either. So it's, I want to look at the things that I can control and the things that I can do to make sure, he has everything he needs to execute, beyond just the, low production levels of, activity.
Ertel, I want to throw a little bit of context in here and see kind of how you would respond to this. Let's say Tom has been in with the company for 3 weeks, right? As opposed to a Tom who's been with the company for 6 years. How do those two situations change the way you think about this?
Well, if Tom was with us for 3 weeks, one of the first things I would ask is, how much time are we spending with Tom to find out what's going on? And again, it becomes the one-on-one. I would instruct either one of my operations managers to spend some one-on-one time with him, with him actually riding in the truck with him. Let's see what's going on. Because the first thing that concerns me are the safe braking and the acceleration. That's dangerous, puts us in liability concern. That makes me think of liability concerns. But I also want to see how Tom is working. So, we can talk about, so then at that point, we're able to coach him on what he may be doing, that he could be doing better based on our experience and expertise. I think this is where we really need to make sure that we are spending personal time with Tom, whether it's 6 years or 3 weeks, because something is going on. Like I need to understand, why is his safe braking like almost to the center of where we don't want him to be? He's not even in the gray area. That's a big concern. Or safe acceleration. Those types of things. Those are the things that are under his control. We can actually talk to him about that. We have to take a look at something. There's a lot of digging that needs to go on here, because of the number of stops that he's doing, production. But this says to me that this is not something that we send him a memo or just have a one-on-one talk to him inside of the office. This is where we actually roll up our sleeves, spend some time, and basically break bread with him to find out what's going on.
I think what I'm hearing here is we can't answer that question unless we start to have a conversation with Tom. We need to see what is happening here, what's going through his mind, whether it's a Tom or him, her, whatever the case may be, whoever that person is in that role. There's something that's going through their head. I got to imagine Tom has got some frustration level here, maybe because they just don't understand something. And by sitting down and having that heart-to-heart conversation with them as to, hey, what's going on here? We get to start to see what those blocks are for Tom, where there's lack of clarity for Tom, I think is what I heard.
If I may, one of the things I want to be clear about is, like, when I take a look at brakes and acceleration, because we just had a conversation at our company about this, that's a training issue. Unless he's taking out some type of frustration, to use your term, on the truck itself, okay, I think this is something he needs to understand. Like, you don't have to smash the brakes, and you don't have to do jackrabbit starts, and taking a look at something like that. The production, I'm not seeing anything, in my opinion. To me, this is more about the understanding. Let's just take Tom at 3 weeks. The understanding of what his skill is and those training opportunities, and less of an emotional thing. Does that make sense? I'm thinking more about tangible training and skills that might be imparted upon him, and less about what he may be feeling while he's doing it. I mean, as far as when I look at this chart.
I think I agree with you, right? It is important to start to see it through their set of eyes, what is going on here and where we have not provided them the support. There is more, clearly, the white space is clearly the area for more. It is there. It's our job to unlock that, is the way I see it. And I'd love to ask anybody in the audience if that's what you're seeing as well here. Do you see a different story that's evolving? Is there a different approach that you might take? Because I'd like to transition that, just make sure time-wise, I'd like to get to one more person, just so you can kind of see do a compare and contrast here. In this case, we have Jerry. Jerry's done a pretty good job here in terms of covering most of his bases as far as being better than average or better. Production per hour, production per mile. This guy's a high flyer in those categories. Average vehicle workday, actual stops made, safe braking, pretty good. But safe acceleration is one place where we have a little bit of, there's some significant room for improvement there. Alex, let me start with you. What do you see? I mean, is there something to unlock here with Jerry as well?
Yeah, well, I would say two things. The first is, I'll say two and a half things. The first is, wow, look at production per mile and per hour with Jerry. So Jerry's going to be an obvious mentor for people who need a little bit of intervention there. And that's something that we can do when we have this kind of data, is we can find the rock stars in certain areas, in certain key areas, and we can connect them with people who need a little bit of intervention and a peer support model. So it's not just my managers coming to tell me I'm doing a bad job. It's, hey, I'm going to connect you with somebody on the team who's getting pretty good at this, and I think they can help you get strong too if you'd like that. I see that, Jerry's got some areas of improvement. Maybe he could be connected with a peer mentor in safe acceleration. One thing I want to say, I mean, for me, I love to like come out of what we're looking at. I like to drop in and come out again. We use a tactic called role performance guide, where we use metrics like this. And Vinay, I got to talk to you about this, because I need to see data like this to give to people. But in those conversations, what we want to see is, at minimum, a person joins the team and they're with a manager or a mentor once a week for the first month, once a month for the first quarter, and once a quarter thereafter that. And they're going to have a conversation about what's going on with them around performance with metrics, just like this one. And then it's, what are the next steps? What are the next actions for intervention, for helping people improve? Or maybe, in the case of talking to Jerry, production per mile, production per hour, would you like to be a mentor? Would that be a cool thing for you to do in that area?
Fair enough. Chase, I'm going to stop the slides after this. Because I'd love to come back to seeing faces as opposed to slides the whole time. Any thoughts from your side? Any perspectives?
I mean, you love seeing the production per hour that high, the production per mile. I like what Alex said. You could use him as, an example and what he's doing successfully to get that to rub off other guys. Otherwise, I think a good thing to do, and what we do in our company is we have, when you have your monthly tech meetings, led by your branch manager, and you have, every other week your lead manager or your lead tech meets with the technicians. I agree also with Alex. I mean, having data like this to look at in meetings like that, to kind of go over where your metrics need to be and where guys are at, would be extremely helpful. But in terms of this chart particularly, I think, how do you think pest control companies, and maybe Artel, just as I'm looking at this chart, he's working with a huge pest control company. How do you guys gauge like safe acceleration? Is that based on a metric in the vehicle, or is that based on like, any kind of speeding tickets or tickets coming into the office, complaints by other drivers? And I was just curious on how, the accel and the brake are gauged from a reliability standpoint as you grow out a massive fleet of vehicles.
Well, I'm gonna switch out of sharing screen so we can kind of come back to. There you go. How's that?
No worries.
Go ahead, Artel.
The truth of the matter is, you get to a point where the GPS is basically your friend. I got to be honest. I was very much against the Big Brother type of approach of having a GPS in the truck. But it has actually saved us a lot of heartache, because by the time they get the speeding tickets, that means they probably got points, which means that when you run that report for them and it goes to the insurance, there are people that become uninsurable because of the number of points they have because of speeding. As a matter of fact, I think Jerry works for me because I have somebody that's exactly what his chart would look like if we had this software. And one of the things that we're working with is getting the Jerry type to slow down. He doesn't have a choice. Now, the slowing down may also impacts the productions per mile, whatever else, because that all those things are based on time. But the truth of the matter is, once you get to that, the technology is your friend. And once you get to that point where you utilize the technology, such as a GPS, what we get are reports. And we've actually upgraded our GPS, our truck GPS, to the point where it talks to people, talking about your driving distance, talking about your following distance, talking about extreme braking. And my phone, you'll see me look down at my phone, goes off all the time with extreme braking. And God forbid, when that crash happens, you'll know about it within moments after it happens. That I would strongly suggest, even if you guys were to get something relatively small, to let you know when they start their trucks. That the GPS system is really one of the best things to have from a production standpoint, because I was looking at Jerry's chart and I kept thinking to myself, I know exactly who that is that works for me. Everything else, he's productive but we had to talk to him. And going to the question that was asked before, he's not a 3-week technician, but he's a 6-month technician, and we are coaching him through driving slower. So hopefully that answers the question.
What GPS system is it that you guys use?
I'm going to claim Sometimers right now because I can't remember the name of it. I'm actually thinking of something else. Our fleet. Give me a minute. Okay.
No worries.
Is Sometimers part-time Alzheimer's? Is that what that is?
Yes, that's what that is.
All right, got it.
Chase or Tell, I'll connect you guys via email just to make sure you guys can share that info. I would like to bring us to close here because we're just getting close on time here. Hopefully everyone who's been listening in has gotten something out of this. But I want to bring it back to what the title was, right? Can we get more out of our employees? Is there more productivity left? I'd like first for you all maybe to go around the horn here. Just, is there more productivity based on what we saw in the data? Is there productivity? Number one, and what's the take-home message for folks? Chase, I'll start with you. Yes or no? Do you think there's more productivity on the table, and how would you draw that out? What would you take home from that?
I absolutely think there's more productivity on the table. There always is, right? I mean, the goal for all of us is to hit our potential and to have our people, hit their potential. And I think, the takeaway from the charts is simple. Is the office's management doing what they need to do, providing tools for the people to be successful, and is the accountability in place? And I like what Artel was saying, earlier about, hey, let's get a branch manager or service manager out to facilitate these employees that are struggling with certain metrics, to keep them accountable. But part of that is coaching them up and teaching them and training them properly, and meeting with them on a regular basis to kind of let them know how they're doing. But there's always room for improvement, and from the leadership team to the technicians to the admins, the CSRs. I think there's always things to look at to improve on and try to keep everybody, performing at the highest level possible.
Alex, you said data. I think you're the one who said, data can be a friend. If you use the technology and the tools the right way, you can start to see potentially the capacity that is still left on the table. Did I get that right? And what's your take-home message?
Yeah, 100%. I think we often want to rely on our gut, and we have been guided by intuition before successfully. So it's not that we should throw out that gut feeling, that intuition, but what the data does is tell us if our gut is right, and it probably is, but then why it's right, and then we can start making guesses about what to do about it. A lot of times people will say to me, I don't know how to use the data. And I often say, if we actually find you the right metrics and look at them at cadence, so if you find the right metrics and we can put them in front of you in a way that you can understand them, you're going to know what to do with them if you're checking them at cadence. Like, you're going to know how to use this data. It's going to be very obvious.
Yeah. Ortel?
One of the first things that I wrote down when Alex said was afraid of the tech, and I thought that it was interesting. That was an interesting statement. We, as leaders, we have to be, and let me say this in conjunction, what also Chase was alluding to. As leaders, we have to make sure that we're on a path of continuous improvement, and technology is actually a part of that. And so, making sure that people aren't afraid of the technology is very, very important. The other thing is that the data that we are looking at removes excuses for us not helping our people to get better. The data basically states, like, this is what this person needs. Spend time with them. This is what this person wants, or at least ask them what they want, so to find out how we can make them better and make them want to be with us. Because a lot of these things are about keeping people, right? About keeping people employed and people working for you and whatnot. So the takeaway, like I said, for me is, making sure that they understand the data. The data takes away the excuses, and it continues to be on the path of continuous improvement. To steal another line from Alex, is to find the rock stars, so that each one can teach one. Because guys, really, nobody wants to hear from the boss, but they love hearing from each other. And so when we create those type of opportunities, we end up becoming a stronger company.
So I think I'll end it here in saying, first of all, Ortel, Chase, Alex, thanks for your time, sharing some thoughts today. Rachel, Gina, Karen, Lori, Josh, thank you all for Nick. Thank you all for joining the conversation as well. But I think there's opportunity, as you said, Chase. It's on the table. There's more there. But how we get it out of them has a lot to do with just the human side of it, and just leaning into saying, hey, how do I support you? And I think it just really kind of starts with that. Gentlemen, thank you for the time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It was fun.